welcome to a special edition of Bronx Talk. With the primary set for Tuesday, June 24th, as part of BronxNet's ongoing commitment to voter literacy, we're hosting interviews and debates with candidates who are running for office. Tonight, we focus on the race in the Democratic primary for Comptroller of the City of New York. There are 4 candidates running in this race. We'll start by welcoming Mr. Ismael Malave, a 20-year manager in government, education, and business. It is Ismael Malave Perez. Nice to see you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really honored to be here.
Let's start with a very basic question. Okay. What is, in your experience, that voters should be considering as they make their choice on who to vote for New York City Comptroller?
Well, besides me being a homegrown Bronxite and a real New Yorker, I am someone who has worked for 5 comptrollers, 16 years, 3 state comptrollers and 2 city comptrollers altogether, 27-year public servant, somebody who went from being a wrenchman as a mechanic to becoming an analyst for New York City, having managed close to $2 billion of the city's real estate portfolio in the Bureau of Asset Management. And I had varying roles for 5 comptrollers. I have a lot of experience. Besides that, publicly educated, CUNY twofer. I have an MBA from CUNY's Harvard, the Zicklin School of Business at Baruch College, and a BA in economics from Levine College, your alma mater.
That is my alma mater. There's no doubting that. Let's get right into some issues. The phrase defund the police has been a lightning rod for discussion. So let's use a different way of looking at crime prevention, and that is specifically supporting productive activities for children after school, programs that promote conflict resolution, gang alternative programs, and numerous other ways to invest in crime prevention. So we'll stay away from using that phrase, but where do the funds come from? What do you defund to get the monies needed for those vital crime prevention programs that are favored, certainly in the Bronx and by many of the city's communities?
Well, I'm glad you asked the question the way you did. I'm one of the back the blue candidates running for city controller, and I don't believe it's time to defund the police, especially with what's going on in our world today. The funds need to come from programs where we can identify underutilized funds that have already been allocated throughout different agencies. The comptroller's role as part of the charter is to audit every agency. And I'm going to audit every agency to identify if there's any waste, fraud, or corruption, or mismanagement. And we all know that every year agencies hold on, or they hoard money, and then they try to spend it in the last few months of the budget. Well, those funds should be allocated to programs like the ones that you mentioned, after-school programs. As a kid, I went to after-school programs, and I participated in the after-school lunches and dinners and playtime on school property and summer programs. And I'm somebody that's going to be an advocate for all those types of programs. But the funding is there. Part of my platform is to implement a monetary applications portal, a digital twin of the city's finances. I have a white paper on it, and it's an amazing opportunity for New York City to follow through as some of the other cities that have digital twins. It's the city's way of creating a new kind of like heart and utilizing AI analytics and checking to see where the money actually is being spent, how much has been drawn down on a digital dashboard for executives and taxpayers alike, to see in real time how the money is being utilized.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about Mayor Adams' plan to transition retired city workers to a privatized Medicare Advantage program. It's been opposed by city retirees. The mayor says the change could save the city $600 million annually, but critics say the savings will be at the expense of vulnerable seniors who have retired. The Medicare Advantage plan is currently on hold, pending legal challenges. A state court is expected to hear arguments this summer. Are you in favor of this switch for New York City workers?
So as a city worker myself, I'm not in favor of it. I take the same position that most of the retirees take. They dedicated all their lives, their tenure. It means a lot to us, the time that they put in for the city. Why take away from their medical benefits at the end after they retire? I believe it's time to invest in our seniors and our retirees, so I'm not in favor of it.
Let's talk about housing. Many Bronx neighborhoods are beset with rogue landlords who have thousands of violations on their properties. As a result, a number of them have resorted to land trusts or the tenant ownership program, to get tenant control of their buildings so they can make improvements. If you are the controller, would you encourage these kinds of tenant ownership solutions for more people who are living in substandard properties?
Absolutely. I'm somebody that grew up in tenement housing, somebody that went from, coming from Puerto Rico, receiving government subsidies, to working for 5 comptrollers, the guys that sign and seal all the checks issued by the city and state of New York. So I lived in 2 buildings that became condemned. I've experienced it. So that's how we became homeless. I'm somebody that is completely and positively for that. Yes.
Let's talk about parks funding. New York City's fiscal year 2025 budget is $112.4 billion. It is the largest budget in the city's history. Advocates say they were promised that 1% of the city's budget would go toward parks, but the city has fallen well short of that, with probably about 0.65% of the budget going to parks, leaving parks administrators flummoxed as to how they can keep the parks properly cleaned and maintained and programmed properly to serve the city. Is 1% of the city's budget for parks realistic?
It's not realistic. I grew up going to parks. I love, Van Cortlandt Park, Pelham Bay Park, Orchard Beach, even some of the other parks across the borough, the 5 boroughs, Central Park, Prospect Park, the parks in Staten Island. I am somebody who's going to be an advocate for making sure that we identify there's additional funding that can go to parks, 100%. Our parks are our greatest asset, especially for New Yorkers that often, don't have anywhere else to go. Well, family time in park is the best time.
Let's move to another part of the city's economic engine, and that is small businesses. In many of the areas of the Bronx, small businesses have left, and there are abandoned commercial properties. So a 2-part question, very logically. Why did this happen? And the second part of it is how to address it so we can build up a vital economic engine in the city of New York and, of course, in the borough of the Bronx, so small businesses can thrive in our city and in our borough.
I completely understand how that, plays a part, especially coming out of the pandemic. I'm somebody who's going to support small businesses and minority business enterprises. And one of the things that I will do is work with, the bids. As a controller, I'll have a direct oversight and a role in advocating for the small business improvement districts, and somebody that, like myself, that actually represented all 5 controllers at the bid level and at the community board level, going to all of the meetings. I know how it works. So I will work with all of the local businesses to try to revitalize these districts that have been abandoned.
Thank you very much. It would be nice if we could isolate ourselves and shield ourselves from everything going on the outside, but the fact is we are subject a lot of times to other factors like the federal budget. The budget being negotiated now would cut vital Medicaid programs to the tune of $625 million. And if this goes through, critics say it's a massive giveaway to billionaires at the expense of children, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families. Can they be protected? How can they be protected? And then, of course, with what we expect coming down from the federal government over time, is this a big issue, and how can people be shielded and the city of New York still thrive?
It absolutely is a big issue. As you said, and as you know, the federal budget is approximately $6 trillion, and New York receives a fair share portion of it is $150 billion altogether. And on top of that, the cut that they're proposing is about $150 billion across the country. That means that New York is going to be pinched between $5 to $7 billion in a shortfall. And the state controller's office recently said that we're facing between $3 to $6 billion budget shortfalls. So here we have a $233 billion budget at the state level, a $115 billion budget at the city level, and clearly there's a shortfall. Now, my proposed monetary applications portal will help protect that. We can see if there's additional dollars that we could reallocate in real time. So if we have this financial digital twin, New York's updated financial business model, we will be able to monitor how Wall Street's doing, where are we with the budget, where are we with the shortfalls, and how do we reallocate those funds. So my monetary applications portal can help, but up front, if given the opportunity to serve the people as the comptroller, I will immediately make sure that the city's budget has a safeguard with the rainy day fund, and I will utilize the power of suing the financial, the federal government to make sure that our financial health is upheld.
Thank you very much for that. The job of controller requires significant management and budgeting skills, as you well know, as well as a thorough understanding of how the city's finances work, logically. So what have you seen in the management of the city's finances that you like, and what kind of reforms to budgetary systems would you recommend? The good and the bad, I guess, is what I'm asking.
So up front, one of the reforms that I recommend is that the city does follow through with my monetary applications portal. It's going to immediately give us the opportunity to see in real time how the city's finances are doing, how much money is being allocated. Right now, we're a reactionary budget. We allocate dollars, and then at the end, what I don't like is that some agencies either mismanage or don't spend down the money that was allocated for, or they are managing it so well that they're doing it, by saving dollars. So if given the opportunity, that's what I will do. I will take any dollars that are left over, and rather than having agencies just blow it out of the way to buy equipment, to reappropriate the dollars to where their shortfalls may exist, and making sure that the services are rendered, and to try to keep the taxpayers' pockets safeguarded by not proposing new taxes.
So if undoubtedly, if you are elected controller, you'll review each of the city's agencies' finances. Which agencies do you think really need immediate attention for auditing and review? Are there red flags right now that you're concerned about? This will be our last question.
Absolutely. Well, the comptroller's role requires that every single agency be audited at least once every 4 years. So I will go back to some of those previous audits to see how I can claw back to see where the mismanagement was, where it existed, how do we rectify, where do we find those dollars, and how do we fix these agencies with issues. So some of the agencies off the bat will be the Department of Education. I will go to the Department of Homeless, and to the HPD, to housing. Everybody's proposing all these, affordable housing. Well, we have money that's been allocated through the City of Yes. So I want to know how those funds are going to be drawn down. We've already allocated $2 billion from the state, and the city put $1 billion. So where's the shortfall? It's $5 billion, the City of Yes. So I am definitely going to be somebody that's going to audit agencies, and not only agencies, I'm also going to audit entities that receive funding from the city, because that gives the Comptroller's Office has the authority to go and audit entities that receive public dollars to make sure that the prevailing wage is defended, and to make sure that those monies are actually being allocated for what they're meant to be.
Ismael Malave Perez,
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck in the rest of the campaign, and we certainly appreciate you joining us here on Bronx Talk.
Thank you so much for having me.
Folks, what we'll do is we'll take a short break, and then we'll be back with one of the other candidates. Don't go away. Welcome back to Bronx Talk as we continue our conversation with the candidates running in the Democratic primary for New York City Comptroller. We've moved our program from the windows on the Bronx studio in the South Bronx to BronxNet's Lehman College studios. Nonetheless, it is time to welcome the council member in the 47th Council District in Brooklyn. It is Council Member Justin Brannan. He is a candidate for Comptroller of the City of New York. Council Member, nice to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on BronxNet.
Let's just start with the basic question. What is, in your experience, that voters should be considering as they make their choice on who to vote for controller of the city of New York?
It's a great question. I'm Councilman Justin Brannan. I currently serve as chair of the Finance Committee in the New York City Council. For the past almost 4 years, I've negotiated and managed and overseen the largest municipal budget in the country to the tune of $115 billion. I'm running for controller because I think the next 4 years, with the threat of cuts coming from Washington, you're going to need someone who's got the guts and also who has the experience. And I really have both. I think there's 3 pillars really to the controller's office. Number one, you have to audit city agencies to hold every dime of taxpayer money accountable. You have to deliver strong returns for retirees as the chief fiduciary to our city's almost $300 billion pension system. And, in the days of Donald Trump and the threat from Washington, you've got to build a fiscal firewall around the city to protect our future as New Yorkers and for the next 4 years against Donald Trump. So I'm ready to do the work, and I hope that the Bronx comes out and votes for me for controller.
As I mentioned to you before we started the program, I picked out topics that I think are important to the people of the Bronx. So let's just kind of launch into some of those topics. Let's get into this. You've heard this before. The phrase defund the police has been a lightning rod for discussion. So let's use a different way of looking at crime prevention, and that is specifically supporting productive activities for children after school, programs that promote conflict resolution, gang alternative programs, and the numerous other ways to invest in crime prevention. So that phrase, defund, is a phrase that everybody's cautious about, but where do the funds come from to do those things? What do you defund to get the monies needed for those vital crime prevention programs that are favored certainly in the Bronx and by many of the city's communities?
Sure, it's a great question. I think defund the police is probably one of the worst slogans I've ever heard because it's so divisive. And I think, if you actually have 5 or 10 minutes to explain to folks the holistic approach to fighting crime, I think people understand it. But defund the police, it sounds like you want to abolish the police department, which obviously I do not support. Look, public safety has to be our number one priority for every elected official, because if New Yorkers don't feel safe, then nothing else we do matters. I know that public safety is the foundation for a thriving city, and our police officers are a vital piece of that puzzle, but they can't be the only piece of that puzzle, right? We need to let our cops do the jobs that they signed up to do while investing in the programs and priorities that prevent crime in the first place. Like you said, we have to expand access to education, to jobs, to healthcare, to food, to housing, to mental health services. We have to ensure that our city's investments in public safety are smart, holistic, and effective. They're grounded in community trust and making every neighborhood a safer place to live, work, and raise a family. And that means investing in more than just our police department. I often say that the neighborhoods that are the safest are not the neighborhoods that have the most cops. They're the neighborhoods that have the best resources, the best schools, the best parks, the best libraries, the best small businesses. Those are the safest neighborhoods. And we need to make sure that every neighborhood is safe like that.
And where do those monies come from? Because there, as well as anybody, there's a reality to the bottom line. Can those things be funded?
Absolutely. I mean, right now we're in the middle of negotiating the FY26 budget, and we're north of $115 billion with an NYPD budget that's over $11 billion. People should, with a budget that big for our police department, people shouldn't feel so unsafe in this city. But we have to invest in jobs, in economic development, in our public schools, in all of these things that help prevent crime in the first place. And we absolutely have the money we need to do it.
Let's talk about an issue that is particularly a budgetary decision issue. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has a plan to transition retired city workers to a privatized Medicare Advantage program that has been opposed by city retirees. The mayor says the change could save the city $600 million annually. Critics say the savings will be at the expense of vulnerable seniors people who have retired from working for the city of New York. The Medicare Advantage plan is currently on hold, as you well know, pending legal challenges, with a state court expected to hear arguments this summer. Are you in favor of this switch for city retired workers, or is there another way to handle this particular issue?
Sure, I am 100% opposed to the switch to Medicare Advantage. I'm the only one in the controller's race that signed on to Intro 1096, which would block this change. There's something very simple at the heart of this whole fight over Medicare Advantage, and that is a promise, right? For generations, New York City told its workers that if they gave the city their best years, we would take care of them when they retired. That meant a stable pension, quality health care, and that wasn't a favor, right? It was part of the deal. It was part of the covenant that the city made with these retirees when they signed up to work for the city decades and decades ago. So to try to save money on the backs of retirees, on the backs of folks who gave their heart and souls and so many years of their lives to the city, it's just wrong. It's a shameful bait and switch to force city retirees into Medicare Advantage. It's basically a slippery slope towards privatization of healthcare, which I absolutely do not support. And look, a promise is a promise. And the city of New York made a promise to its workers on the day that they signed up to work for our great city. And the healthcare plan that they were promised on the day that they started working for our city is the healthcare plan that they should have until they're 200 years old.
Well, that would be nice if they last that long. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I want to talk about housing, and there are many different angles. One of the things that I've heard and seen happen in the Bronx is issues and how Bronx tenants deal with rogue landlords who have thousands of violations on their properties. As a result, many of those tenant organizations have resorted to land trusts and TOP, what is the tenant ownership program, to get tenant control of their buildings so they can make improvements. If you are the controller, would you encourage these kinds of tenant ownership solutions for more people who are living in substandard properties, which of course is really a big problem here in the Bronx, and I'm sure for you in Brooklyn as well?
Sure. I mean, I represent Coney Island, so I represent a lot of public housing as well. I do not support the privatization of public housing. I work very hard on lien sale reform. We need people to catch up on their bills. We need people to pay their taxes, but we also don't want to put people out in the street. And the city of New York should not be evicting people in the middle of a dire housing crisis, and making sure that these units and these buildings do not get into the hands of predatory actors is exactly what we're trying to prevent, right? We fought hard to reform the lien sale process because, frankly, the process that was in effect and created during Giuliani was just downright ghoulish and was heartless and was not doing enough to keep people in their homes. And that's what we need to be doing. We need people to get back on track to paying their bills, but we also have to make sure that our top priority is keeping people in their homes and not further exacerbating the homelessness crisis. So any pathway to ownership for renters to own property, to build equity, to build that generational wealth, that is something that I absolutely wholeheartedly support.
A lot of people know that the borough of the Bronx is the borough of universities. It also happens to be what is called the borough of parks. New York City's fiscal year budget, you just said you're negotiating over, $115 billion, which is going to be the largest budget in the city's history. Advocates of parks say they were promised that 1% of that budget would go toward parks. It's not a lot of money, and certainly if you're talking about $115 billion, you're still just talking over $1 million. But the city has fallen short of that, with 0.65% going to parks in the city of New York. And that leaves park administrators flummoxed on how they can keep the parks properly cleaned and maintained and programmed to serve the city properly. Is 1% of the city's budget for parks a realistic goal? And certainly if you were controller, would you advocate for it?
Absolutely. I mean, I've fought very hard as chair of the finance committee to increase funding to our parks. Frankly, not just the Adams administration, but many mayoral administrations have been cavalier about underfunding our parks for a very long time. And now it would take a lot of money just to get us back to zero, basically, right? I think the Parks Department at this point is down about $60 million, and that would just make them whole for all the cuts that they saw during COVID and some of the cuts they saw during the Adams administration. I mean, look, I grew up in an apartment building, and the park across the street from my house was my backyard. I appreciate, the value and the public health value that our parks provide. I'm a huge, huge fighter for our parks, and we need to be doing more, right? Having less than 1% of our budget going to our parks and our green space and our open space in a city as dense and as crowded as New York City. Our parks are an urban oasis. It's one of the great public spaces that we have in this city. And it's just confusing to me that mayors and City Hall has been so cavalier with underfunding our parks. So we've got to do more for our parks and also for our parks workers, right? For the folks that actually keep our parks clean, that cut the grass in our parks. All of this stuff is so critical. And it's crazy to me that we've had to fight so hard to get these investments made, because I feel like parks are one of our great equalizers in the city. Everyone enjoys our parks, right? From the rich and the poor and the young and the old and diverse, communities across the city. This is where we gather. It's where we have birthday parties. It's where we play sports. It's totally crazy to me that we've got to fight so hard to fund our parks. But it's absolutely something that I've always fought for and something I will continue to fight for as a New Yorker.
Council member, we have time for one more question. You started your opening statement was really about fighting the powers that be in the federal government. Right now, the federal budget is being negotiated, and that would cut vital Medicaid programs to the tune of $625 million. If the budget goes through, critics say it is a massive giveaway to billionaires at the expense of children, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families. Of course, the Bronx is maybe the biggest user of Medicaid in the state. How can those people be protected if, in fact, those kinds of cuts come through?
I mean, look, there's no good answer here, right? We send a lot of money to Washington. People in the Bronx send a lot of their tax dollars to Washington, and we deserve to see some of that money come back into our communities. This is our money. These are your tax dollars. And if half of the city relies on Medicaid, and you're seeing cuts being threatened to Social Security, to our veterans benefits, to our 9/11 health fund. I mean, what's going on in Washington is completely insane, that they're trying to extend tax credits, tax breaks to the super rich, and they're trying to balance a budget on the back of our most vulnerable. I will not stand for it. I'm going to continue to fight like hell in my role right now as finance chair of the council, as a controller candidate, as your next controller. We need people who are going to stand up and fight. That's why I'm saying you need someone who's got the budget experience, but also someone who's got the guts, who's going to stand up and fight for our most vulnerable New Yorkers. Because frankly, when you see these crazy, cruel budget cuts coming out of Washington, the people that are hurt first and worst are our most vulnerable, our low-income families, and those are the folks that we need to fight for in this moment. And I think people should be demanding more of their politicians at all levels of government to stand up and fight back.
Council member, we hit it right on the nose. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, that is Council member Justin Brannan running for City Controller. We appreciate your time on BronxNet Television.
Thank you so much. I love the Bronx. My grandfather is from the Bronx. I have a lot of love. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Folks, we'll take a short break and then we'll be back with another of the candidates for controller. It will be Senator Kevin Parker who will join us. Don't go away. Okay, welcome back to BronxTalk as we continue our conversations with the candidates running in the Democratic primary for New York City Controller. So please join me in welcoming the senator from Brooklyn's 21st Senatorial District. It is Senator Kevin Parker. Senator, nice to have you with us.
No, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We appreciate your time. Let's start with a very basic question. What is in your experience that voters should be considering as they make their choice on who to vote for in this primary for New York City Controller?
Well, first of all, I'm born and raised in Brooklyn, New York. I actually grew up in the Bushwick Projects in NYCHA. Went to public school my entire life, including Midwood High School, where I graduated from. And I've spent, 30 years working on public finance and municipal finance issues. Everything from being on Wall Street at Payne Weber, which is now UBS, From working for the state comptroller, I worked for Carl McCall, first African-American elected statewide, and then 20 years in the New York State, actually 23 years in the New York State Senate. And every single year, I've actually been a member of the Finance Committee, and over a decade of working on both the Banking Committee and Insurance Committees. So I have a background that both comes from the communities that are very much like the Bronx, but also, a background in public and municipal finance that allows me to do this job at a high level. Beyond that, I think the thing that people should pay attention to is my vision, and that is to tackle the affordability gap, to make sure that we invest in workforce housing and make sure that we invest in small businesses and move our economy from Wall Street to Main Street.
One of the biggest issues in all the polls, and when they poll New Yorkers, and certainly here in the borough of the Bronx, is crime prevention. Let's take a different kind of look at that. The phrase defund the police has been a lightning rod for discussion. You know that. So let's use a different way of looking at crime prevention, and that is specifically supporting productive activities for children after school, programs that promote conflict resolution, gang alternative programs, and numerous other ways to invest in crime prevention. So we'll stay away from using the phrase, but the fact is, the funds have to come from somewhere. Where do the funds come from? What do you defund to get the monies needed for vital crime prevention programs that are favored certainly in the Bronx and throughout the city?
Gary, I'm literally the leader on police reform in the state legislature, right? After the murder of George Floyd, the state of New York was the only state in the entire country to pass a comprehensive set of legislative initiatives to address police reform. We passed 10 bills. Of those 10 bills, 4 of them were mine, including a bill that reaffirmed the right to record police activities, another one that created an Office of Police Misconduct within the Attorney General's office, another which, in fact, looks at false 911 reporting and others, right? And so this idea of police reform is something that I continue to fight, still trying to pass a definition of excessive use of force here in the state of New York, as well as a bill that would eliminate, qualified immunity, right? So this has been an area in which I have spent a lot of time on, and certainly something I would focus on as your next city comptroller. And beyond that, I've had legislation that would actually invest in creating universal after school. I started using the term universal after school really first among people in the legislature. And the term has caught fire, and I'm glad that people are now getting there. But literally every single school in our city should have an after-school program. I like the Jeff Canada model of a beacon school where, schools are not just used for homework help and karate and basketball, but where a parent can get, take, family counseling, where they can get, job skills, where they can get English as a second language, where they can get Al-Anon. We should be using these schools as beacons of light for the entire community. We should also expand music, art, athletics, and dance as regular parts of the curriculum. And particularly our school athletics program really should be more robust than it is. But lastly, I've also been the leader on the issue of, emergency mental health units. I really believe that the next phase in terms of criminal justice will be to create essentially an ambulance department for those folks with mental health issues, and making sure that we have access to resources instead of just a three-tiered system. Right now, when you call 911, you only get 3 responses. A police emergency response, which is the default response, a medical emergency response, or a fire response. If somebody has a mental health crisis, we have no way to deal with that in a unique way, and we really do by training people, just like we train ambulance workers and EMS workers to respond to medical help. We should be training a set of unique workers to deal with mental health issues and get those folks the proper help. And I think that combination of the things that I've talked about would lead us to a safer city. And as your city comptroller, I will find the funds to make sure that we get that done by working with both state and federal government in order to fund our priorities.
Thank you very much for that answer. Let's talk about this. New York City Mayor Eric Adams has a plan to transition retired city workers to a privatized Medicare Advantage program, which has been opposed by city retirees, as you well know. The mayor says the change could save the city $600 million annually, but critics say the savings will be at the expense of vulnerable seniors. The Medicare Advantage plan is currently on hold pending legal challenges, with the state court expected to hear arguments this summer. So are you in favor of this switch for city workers?
Well, I say if it does not fix, don't broke it, right? And so I think in this, particular context, in this moment, right, and understanding there's some things coming down from the federal government that is pending that could be catastrophic for our state and particularly for our seniors. The current system, really covers, 98% of the people in the entire state. And so I have to look at the plan more specifically and run the numbers on it to see the impacts. But certainly the way I understand our system now is that there aren't a bunch of vulnerable seniors, and we certainly should be protecting those in their golden years and those who have given so much to our great city already.
I want to ask you a question about housing that kind of takes a different look on how to solve, the housing crisis. We have many different issues, and all the candidates and all the races have proposed different things on how to deal with housing. Many Bronx neighborhoods are beset with rogue landlords who have thousands of violations on their properties. As a result, a number of them have resorted to land trusts and TOP, which is a tenant ownership program, to get tenant control of their buildings so they can make improvements. If you are the controller, are these the kinds of things you would encourage when it comes to tenant ownership solutions for more people who are living in substandard properties?
Well, first of all, the housing crisis is really one of the top things we have to deal with in our great city. And I think everything is on the table at this point. The focus for me really is a couple of things. The first of which is workforce housing. I think when we talk about affordability, we have to say affordable for who? Coming from Brooklyn, and I know this is very similar in the Bronx, we have teachers married to social workers who have no place to live. We have nurses married to transit workers who have no place to live, and we really have to change that. You shouldn't be working for this city or in this great city and not be able to afford to live here. And so we really have to, figure out ways to do that. I would use some funds from the pension fund to both make money for pensioners and then simultaneously build affordable housing. We also need to audit NYCHA in a really significant way and see where, units are, offline and bring those units back online. We have to figure out how to right size senior citizens and simultaneously allowing them to age in place. And we also have to look at a lot of, alternative home ownership programs, not just, traditional white picket fence home ownership, but look at ways that people can own in our city. And so I think there's a lot of work ahead of us. And I think having me as city controller, somebody who's lived both in public housing and now owns their own home, is kind of uniquely positioned to deal with that transition.
Senator, a lot of people know that the borough of the Bronx is the borough of universities, but it also happens to be the borough of parks. New York City's fiscal year 2025 budget is approaching $115.4 billion, the largest in the city's history. Advocates say that they were promised 1% of that budget would go towards parks, and it's not a lot of money. It's really just $1.15 million. But the city has fallen well short of that, with just 0.65% of the city's budget going to parks, leaving parks administrators flummoxed on how they can keep the parks cleaned and maintained and programmed properly. So how can we get 1% of the city's budget, or can we get 1% of the city's budget dedicated toward parks and parks in the Bronx?
Mm-hmm. I think that open spaces are really an important part of the milieu of New York City. Again, growing up as a kid in this great city, I had a lot of great memories growing up in our city parks, and having well-maintained parks is also part of having not just a quality neighborhood, but also keeping crime down in your community as well. And again, I think that everything's on the table, and I think certainly we have to look towards the state around developing partnerships around maintaining our parks, but also public-private partnerships, and bring some corporate entities in as well to help us, maintain our parks in a way that would benefit our communities. And so, looking forward to the challenge, and certainly something that we need to put as an important priority within the issues of the city.
The federal budget being negotiated would cut vital Medicaid programs to the tune of $625 million. If the budget goes through, critics say it's a massive giveaway to billionaires at the expense of children, seniors, people with disabilities, and working families. How can they be protected in the face of what apparently is coming down from the federal government?
Well, first of all, I think, we have to see exactly how bad things are going to be. There are dynamics in which, the state can deal with it. And there's other things that are going to really be crippling for both the state and the city. And so I think that right now we really need to, build up reserves, our cash reserves, but also make sure that we are not running an austerity budget, but making sure that we're making good fiscal choices. And again, the audit function of the city controller's office is going to be a critical part of that dynamic to look at things in areas in which money is being wasted and making sure that we're making the right choices and the most economically efficient choices. And so audits in places like NYCHA, like the MTA, like HPD are going to be absolutely critical to make sure that we hold on to every dollar that we have.
Final question for you, sir. The job of controller requires significant management and budgeting skills, as well as thorough understanding of how the city's finances work. What have you seen in the management of the city's finances that you like? What's going well? And what kind of reforms to budgetary systems would you recommend?
Right. Well, let me say this. I have a lot of experience in this. Again, having worked on Wall Street, having worked in the state controller's office, being on the finance committee, being on the banking and insurance committees, and I think I bring all of those skills to bear. When I look at the system right now, something that I think does work well is, the way that we have invested money for the pension fund, and I think that's I think this could be some improvements, of course, but certainly, up until recently, we've made money with the pension fund. What I do think there's a lot of problems with is our payment system for nonprofits, and particularly in Black and Latino communities like the one I come from in Brooklyn, and certainly many of the communities in the Bronx share that we're nonprofits are some of the most important corporations in those communities. And you can't, be 90 days, 120 days late on reimbursements and payments to these nonprofits and then expect our communities to flourish. It's one of the things that I promise I will fix on day one. I don't think it's as complicated as some of my opponents make it seem. I think it's more people, more hands on deck, and attention to the situation. You certainly will get that attention from me, and making sure that our nonprofit organizations get paid the money they're due, and that there's proper coordination between the city controller's office and the mayor's office of contracts.
That's one of the things that I hear from not-for-profits is that we're due the money, but it's taking forever to get it. So systemizing that and certainly greasing the wheels on that probably would be pretty effective. Senator, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time, and good luck in the rest of the campaign.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Enjoy the weekend, Gary.
You too, my friend. We will take a short break, then we'll be back with another of the candidates for controller of the city of New York. Okay, welcome back to Bronx Talk as we continue our conversations with the candidates running in the Democratic primary for New York City Controller. Please join me in welcoming the Borough President of Manhattan. It is Mark Levine. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you, Gary. It's great to be in the presence of a broadcasting icon.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations on 1,500 episodes of Bronx Talk.
It's kind of amazing. I try not to think about it. We just move right along. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about a very basic question. What, in your experience, should voters be thinking about as they make their choices on who to vote for in the primary for New York City Controller?
Well, I started my career here in the Bronx.
In the Bronx.
Just a few blocks away from here. I was a teacher at Junior High School 149, Elijah D. Clark, on 146th Street between Willis and 3rd Ave. I taught bilingual math and science. Soy bilingüe, hablo español bastante bien. This is where my career began here in the Bronx, and it's great to be back. I saw that many of my students and their families had no connection to the financial system, no bank accounts, no credit cards, relying instead on pawn shops and check cashing stores. So I did something about it. I founded a community financial institution, a credit union based in Washington Heights that has now made $100 million of small loans, helping families get access to buy a home computer, borrow money to start a business, even get access to a mortgage. That's the base that allowed me to run for office. I eventually became a member of the New York City Council, representing Washington Heights and West Harlem, just across the river from us. I had the honor of chairing the Parks Committee, of chairing the Health Committee, but my proudest accomplishment in the council was passing a law together with my partner in the City Council and now my fellow borough president, Vanessa Gibson, to establish the right to an attorney for all tenants facing eviction in New York City. It's been a game changer for tenants, and it's really leveled the playing field for people here in the Bronx and everywhere who are facing eviction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Borough President. Let's just get to some issues. Let's go to crime. The phrase defund the police has been a lightning rod for discussion, as we all know. Let's use a different way of looking at crime prevention, and that is specifically supporting productive activities for children after school, programs that promote conflict resolution, gang alternative programs, and numerous other ways to invest in crime prevention strategies. So we'll stay away from using that phrase, but where do the funds come from? What do you defund to get the monies for those vital crime prevention programs that are favored certainly in the Bronx and really out of all city communities?
We have real public safety challenges in the Bronx and in New York City right now. And particularly, we have the tragedy of young people who are picking up guns. And we had this horrible incident in the Bronx a few weeks ago, a gentleman named Daoud Marji, who was shot. He was an innocent bystander. And just a few days ago, as we're recording, we learned that the suspect, the shooter, is a boy who's 13 years old.
It's horrifying to even think.
Horrifying to think that a young person would be at a place in life where at age 13, they would take someone else's life. And it reflects our failure to do enough for young people, to do enough to provide after-school programs and job training and summer experiences and mentoring and more. Now, policing is part of the solution. We have a real shortage of staffing at the NYPD right now. We have 2,500 vacant positions. We do need to fill them. But that can't be the only solution. We've got to invest in the kinds of programs for young people to give them a positive alternative. Now, I've laid out a number of ways to save money in the budget, one of which is to rein in the excessive use of outside contractors. We spend billions on outside contractors in city government, and we don't really get great value for that in some cases. So I would like to rein that in, and youth development would be one way I would like to invest those savings.
Let's move on to health care. Mayor Adams' plan to transition retired city workers to a privatized Medicare Advantage plan has been opposed by city retirees. The mayor says the change would save the city $600 million annually. But critics say the savings will be at the expense of vulnerable seniors, people who are retired. The Medicare Advantage plan is currently on hold pending legal challenges, with a state court expected to hear arguments this summer. So, are you in favor of this switch for retired city workers?
Yeah, this is a matter I might actually have a role in formally as Comptroller, because every contract has to be reviewed and certified by the Comptroller, and I expect this might come to the desk of the next Comptroller. I'll have to review it based on the details of the contract and where the policy is at. But I can say some values now, which is every retiree, and I hope to be a retiree myself one day, should have excellent health care. And I also believe we should really fight to make sure we have zero premiums on health insurance, as we do for civil servants. I'll fight for those things. And if indeed I'm in a position to review that contract, I would make sure I would consult with retirees, with current civil servants, with labor leaders, with other experts. And I also want to mention we have a broader problem of overpriced, inconsistent, and non-transparent hospital costs that really are a problem for private patients and also for public sector workers. I want to help rein in those costs to tackle the broader challenges.
Let's talk about the housing and really a conditional thing for many Bronx buildings and many Bronx neighborhoods. They are beset with rogue landlords who have thousands of violations on their properties. As a result, a number of them have resorted to land trusts and tenant ownership program to get tenant control of their buildings so they can make improvements. If you are the controller, would you encourage these kinds of alternative tenant ownership solutions for more people living in substandard properties.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, they're all over the Bronx and throughout the city.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great alternative. We have some really good models in Manhattan, one in East Harlem, in the Lower East Side, that have been going for decades, that really show that this is empowering of residents and that it eliminates the threat of abusive landlords or landlords who just don't invest in their properties. So I totally support Community Land Trust and would as comptroller.
Let's talk about parks. You had mentioned that you were a big supporter of parks. You were the chair of the Parks Committee in the City Council. New York City's fiscal year budget is $112.4 billion, the largest in the city's history. Advocates say that they were promised that 1% of the budget would go toward parks. But the city has fallen short of that. They're getting just about 0.65%. Of the city's budget going to parks, leaving parks administrators flummoxed on how they can keep the parks cleaned and maintained and programmed to serve the city and certainly the borough of the Bronx properly. Is 1% of the city's budget for parks realistic?
Yes, it's realistic, and it must be our goal. This city used to devote 1.5% to parks in the 1970s. And every time we've had financial challenges, we've cut that budget, but we've never restored it. And so it's down to now only about 0.5%. It's not enough. It's not enough. And green space is so critical to our city. It's critical to the health of residents in the Bronx. It's not just about pretty pictures. Trees cool a neighborhood. They contribute to public safety when you have a well-maintained park. You know, I've been seeing what's happening in St. Mary's Park. Mm-hmm. Near where we are right now. It was the closest big park to the school where I taught in. And it's heartbreaking to see the conditions of St. Mary's Park. And there's no shortcut. We've got to invest more. We do need to devote 1% of the city budget to our Parks Department.
Let's move to another very important part of the city's economy, and that is small businesses.
Yes.
In many of the areas of the Bronx, small businesses have left. There are abandoned commercial properties. So here's a two-part question. Why is this so? And then, of course, how to address it to build up a vital economic engine of small businesses in the borough of the Bronx and, of course, throughout the city.
Well, small businesses are an absolute pillar of the economy of New York. We are the most entrepreneurial city in the world, and small businesses are cycling money back into the community, and they're just essential. It's very, very hard to run a small business in New York right now. And too often the city itself is an obstacle, not a partner, by making it so difficult to get all the regulatory approvals and the permits and pass the inspections, and the bureaucratic delays are terrible. Also, it's extremely hard to get access to credit, to capital for small business. This is something, of course, I worked on in founding a credit union, but I've done it now as borough president. We founded a $2 million fund for small businesses in Manhattan with loans that are 0% interest, up to $50,000. We've now lent that $2 million out. I want to do this citywide as comptroller, including here in the Bronx, so that we increase access to credit. And I'll fight very hard to cut bureaucratic delays and obstacles as well, so that small businesses here in the Bronx can really thrive.
It'd be nice to be able to say, hey, we're enclosed here and there's nothing that affects us. But the fact is the federal budget being negotiated would cut vital Medicaid programs to the tune of $625 million. If this budget goes through, we'll see what happens, of course. That critics say is a massive giveaway to billionaires at the expense of children and seniors and people with disabilities and working families. In New York City, where we have, and especially in the Bronx, where we have numerous people, more people on Medicaid than anywhere in the state, how can they be protected?
Look, Donald Trump is a dire threat to New York City, a dire threat to the Bronx. He's tearing immigrant families apart. He is also threatening our budget. He is threatening to cut critical funding for health care, for food assistance, for rental vouchers, and much more. We've got to fight this on every front. We need to partner with our allies in Congress to take this on. We need to also prepare our city budget to plug holes in case we have to restore vital services. I have called for an increase in the reserve funds in the city budget this year. It's being passed in the next week or two. That would add $2 billion to our reserve funds so that we can have a buffer to fill in the gaps for health, for safety, for food, for housing assistance. This is going to be a major role of the comptroller to fight back against Trump and to protect vital city services in our budget. I'll be all in on this fight.
Just to give you the final question here, and I'll introduce it this way. The job of controller requires significant management and budgeting skills, as well as thorough understanding of how the city's finances actually work. So what have you seen in the management of the city's finances that you like, and what kind of reforms to budgetary systems would you recommend?
Okay, we're about to pass a $115 billion budget. Do you think that we're getting good value out of that $150 billion?
Are you asking me that question? I'll take a pass, and
Okay.
I'll let the viewers.
I think
make
most of
that
the viewers
choice.
would agree that we're not. That we desperately need a government which is more efficient, more modern, which gives more value for taxpayers, and which delivers better services. This is what I will fight for as comptroller, and there are real powers in this office. Audit of every city agency, investigation, subpoena power of the mayor of every city agency. This is the second most powerful job in city government, and I will use it to ensure we deliver better services to people, whether it's in affordable housing, whether it's in helping people with mental health struggles get off the street into the care they need, whether it's investing in parks and other quality of life issues. These are my passions. I've been fighting and winning on these issues throughout my career, and as comptroller, I'll use the powers of the office to ensure city government does better for New Yorkers and for residents of the Bronx.
Mark Levine, Manhattan Borough President, good luck in the rest of the campaign, and we appreciate your time here on BronxTalk, and we'll see you around town one way or the other. Good luck in the campaign.
Thank you so much, Gary.
That concludes tonight's program. The early voting period is Saturday, June 14th through Sunday, June 22nd. The primary, of course, is Tuesday, June 24th. Please make sure to vote. We thank everyone on our production crew, and of course to you too. It's the people of the Bronx that matter to us here at BronxNet Television, so we'll see you next time. Good night.